Hi there, Carl here, and welcome to this video where I tell you a little bit about myself, a bit of my story. And I'm just conscious of not talking for too long because I could talk a lot about my last 52 years, but I'll make it as relevant as possible for you and as unboring as possible. So I'm recording this in beautiful Bali. It's a gorgeous day here, and the first thing is I've been living in Bali for the last 14 years. Let me back up a little bit on that. I'll just go through chronological, then I want to dip into a couple of key decision points along the course of my life. So originally from Australia, you quite possibly worked that piece out. I spent 14 years in the army, so I joined the army and I was like 17 years and 4 months old or something like that, and I looked about 13. Extremely young, but ended up spending 14 years in the military. I finished up as a major after having worked on the Sydney Olympic Games on a project for a couple of years, fantastic project. And then after that, I went and worked in Salt Lake City for the Winter Olympic Games, 2002. Then went to Athens for a couple of years for the Olympic Games there. Then went to Turin, in Italy for the Winter Olympic Games, and then went to Qatar for a couple of years for the Doha Asian Games, and then finally left the security space and did what I always wanted to do. I went off and did this coaching thing and moved to Bali end of 2007 to set up my coaching business, and that's been an amazing experience. There's been lots of different things that have happened over the course of that piece there. A couple of things. First thing, I joined the army because I thought it was the easy choice, and it was the easy choice because I'd grown up in quite a hierarchical family environment. Dad at the top, I was the little mini-me of dad, following him around, trying to do what he did, learning behaviours that my father had, that sort of thing. So then I go to another hierarchical institution, the army. And what I found while I was there was I could do this thing if I focused on it, paid attention, was present with what I was doing it. But I really wanted to be in a more creative space. I really loved working with people. I love this, interpersonal thing. I also was fascinated about why we do what we do, so that was sort of percolating away. And I didn't like following straight lines, and I didn't like just doing stuff because we'd always done it. I used to get in trouble in the military. I'd why are we doing this? Oh, we've always done it this way. Yeah, but it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but it's traditional. I don't care. Is it effective? Is it efficient? Is it leading to the result that we want? So I was always sort of challenging. I've always been interested in the question why, and driven numerous people up the wall. My present girlfriend of the last 14 years, I drive her up the wall by asking lots of whys. I'm sure I drove my parents up the wall asking lots of whys. But that's what I'm about. I'm extremely curious to understand, why things work the way they do, why this fits with this, why this led to this or whatever. So that's driven a lot of my life. One of the things for me that was instrumental was an experience of taking a year's leave without pay from the military in 1996. And, preceding that experience, which taught me so much, was this horrendous relationship breakdown that if that didn't happen, I don't think I would have went overseas, which wouldn't have led to all these other things. So I often go back and I'm extremely grateful for that extremely tumultuous relationship. So I send out loving vibes to that beautiful person I was in a relationship with. And early 20s, you're pretty young, you're making stuff up as you go. So I'm very grateful for that because that took me overseas. And what I found when I went overseas was I realized that the institution I'd been part of, the military, my family, once I removed myself from the known and familiar, I started to re-explore and investigate and learn for the first time who I truly was at my core. When I was in the military, I used to be a total homophobe. I also didn't like guys with long hair and earrings and all that stuff, who are all institutionalized skunk. And when I went overseas, traveling, doing the Antipodean, traveling through Europe, other parts of the world, I realised that I just love people, and I don't care what colour they are, I don't care what sexual persuasion, I don't care about the length of their hair, types of their tattoos or whatever. I'm more interested in good people, having heart-to-heart connections. So that was the first thing I realised. I realised so much of our life experience is based on the beliefs that we bring into the story, and so many of those beliefs are, institutionalized or family or whatever. When we get away from those and we start to explore who we are, then we're like, okay. So that for me was instrumental, me understanding who I am, and I strongly encourage people to do those sabbaticals where they leave the known familiar and start to explore a little bit of the edginess and uncertainty of who they are. The second thing happened for me, I'd taken that year's leave without pay, came back to the military, and a part of me was feeling a bit cowardly that I actually came back. Most of my colleagues, military colleagues, didn't expect me to come back. They're like, bye-bye, I guess we'll see you at some time in the future. But I came back because that was a safety blanket. Plus, I wanted to finish a degree. I had some debts to pay off, and I'd busted my knee up, originally from rugby, but totaled it skiing in Lake Louise in Canada. That's a completely different story. But so I decided to come back to the military. So I came back for these, logical reasons. But a part of me felt like that I was being a little bit of a softie, going back to the security blanket of mummy, going back to the military. So because I was looking at myself in the mirror, and part of me wasn't happy with the level of courage I was showing up with in my life, then we start having these feelings that we're not comfortable with, so we need to distract them. And my choice of distraction was alcohol. So, for a couple of years there, really hitting the alcohol pretty heavily. And, in the military environment, officers' mess, cheap alcohol, it was just conducive to it. But what I ended up doing, I was I had a bender of a weekend, drinking all weekend, and then I woke up in the middle of the night. It might have been, about 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning or whatever. And for some reason, I've switched the television on, which isn't necessarily, something that I'd typically do. And I've switched the television on, and there's this infomercial. This is back in 1999. There's this infomercial of Anthony Robbins, and he's firing from the hip, and he's selling his personal development program, Personal Power 2. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I pick the phone up, I push the buttons. It's got a cable attached to it back in the old days. I talk to a real person on the other end. I pull out my plastic and I read out the numbers on my plastic to the person who I'm talking to on the other end. And I've ordered this program, and it's a series of CDs. And it arrives, and I decide to do this 30-day program, Easter 1999. As a result of that program, I've decided that I was going to start yoga. I was going to go vegetarian, maybe occasionally a bit of seafood, pescatarian, I can't remember what they call that. And also, I was going to stop getting drunk. These three things caused this amazing course correction in my life. All my mates in the military thought I was going a bit bonkers and wondered what was coming next. And I'd go to barbecues, the Great Aussie Barbecue, and I'd have some soda waters, or maybe I'd have some light beers. I'd have some aubergine or some zucchini or some vegetables to grill on the barbecue. My mates would tell me to piss off and come back when I had a case of beer on my shoulder and, dragging half a cow in with me. So there was, for a few months there, I really had to persist. I've, jumped outside of the known, the familiar, even my friends' circles, to individualize and walk my own path. But what happens a lot of time is that a lot of people, feel uncomfortable with you leaving the gang, so they try to pull you back in. So there's a bit of this sort of thing, and that requires a lot of courage to stay your own course. So I've stayed my own course, and at the end of that military time, end of 2000 after the Sydney Olympics, I took another sabbatical, travelled through South America, different things, and then had the opportunity to work in the Olympic Games over there for the Salt Lake City Winter Olympic Games 2006. And part of doing that was I wanted to work overseas. I had this goal about making a certain amount of money over a certain time, but just the opportunity to work overseas. And I turned down some good offers in Australia that were guaranteed in order to possibly get this opportunity to work overseas. And again, it was a great intuitive decision of mine. And again, we're going to talk about being superhuman and our need to tap into our intuition and listen to those voices when they tell us, turn down this guaranteed opportunity to open yourself up to this possibility over here. And, a lot of times those possibilities come to fruition. So I started that, but at the same time I was studying. I did some energy work. I was doing Reiki. I did Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 as I was doing this consulting, security consulting. I was studying a certificate 4 in personal fitness training. So I was starting to build up the skill set so I could go into this coaching space, because my intention was to finish this consulting with a nest egg of money and then move into this consulting space, move into this coaching space. So I ended up doing that. I finished contract end of 2006, taken another sabbatical 2007, travelled overseas through South America, different things. Did a training course in just outside of Seattle in the USA, neuro-linguistics programming, hypnotherapy. Also did more training in this Reiki, this energy work. And that was like a big turn point for me. So I came back end of 2007 and set myself up as a coach in Bali, and I've been coaching since then. And since then I've, been involved in my own businesses. I've had failed businesses here in Bali. My first business, complete disaster, lost all my money, emotional heartache along the way, but I call it my, my real life MBA, about the cost of a decent MBA. So I look at it and I'm grateful for that experience, because it led into being involved in a successful business, the Practice Yoga Center, which is still, here in Bali, in Canggu, beautiful center, teaching very traditional yoga. Got a beautiful staff and beautiful team there. So I was involved in that business. Originally coaching the two founders. I realized that, two founders, different ages, different life cycles, different beliefs, and I'm very good at this integration piece. So working together with them to bring this yoga center from a rice field into, it's an amazingly epic, beautiful venue. And, at some point they invited me to come in as one of the co-owners. So I came in as a co-owner, set up my coaching business out of the practice there, and was involved heavily into the business there. By this stage I'd been doing yoga for 2016, so about 17 years. So I've always been fascinated with yoga, and I'm most interested in yoga off the mat. The idea of, we do these poses on the mat, but who do we show up as in life? I'm very interested in the philosophy, whether it's the philosophy of stability, whether it's the philosophy of non-attachment, whether it's the philosophy of non-reactivity. So all of those yogic principles I like to bring into my life. So, I bring those principles off the mat, and that's where I'm most interested in. So I'm very interested in this practical side. As I said in one of the other presentations, when I talked about intuition, I made the decision to leave the business. And I left that the middle of 2019, did some more traveling. As I do, I went back to India, stayed with a family that I'd met there years ago, and saw the two girls had grown up, and one off to be a nurse and one off doing some management training. So, beautiful to see that family's journey and that sort of thing. So the thing was, I left the business end of 2019 and started scaling down to a business of one, where I would do my coaching business, and I run my coaching business from home. I've got a beautiful space where I'd have clients come along, or I'd do a lot of remote coaching. And that came at the perfect time, because 2020 everything shut down. I had very little overheads, very little expenses, little nest egg tucked over to the side. So I was pretty anti-fragile through the whole 2021 experience right up to now. and I was able to scale things down and that not affect me, my lifestyle or anything like that. So it allowed me to scale my business back significantly, and with that extra time I went deep dive into the research. I wanted to understand, because I've understood very well for 20 years a lot of stuff about physical and mental health. I stopped taking pharmaceuticals back in 2004 when I had pneumonia and pleurisy. I had this beautiful experience where I had this doctor, a Greek doctor with lots of letters after his name. I had pneumonia and I'd seen a doctor, but I had this pain in my ribs and I didn't know what it was, so I went to see a specialist, and someone knew someone who got me in to see this awesome Greek specialist. And when I saw him, he did the diagnosis and he said, "Oh, you've got pleurisy, which is an infection on the lining of your lungs." And he said, he talked to me about lifestyle for about 45 minutes, which blew my mind. Here's a doctor, specialist, who highly paid, who sits there and has a conversation about lifestyle. It really opened my mind to the difference between a factory produced doctor and a real doctor who wanted to know what was going on physically, psychologically, holistically. And what he even said to me, he said, "Look, I can give you painkillers, this infection on your lungs, but if you don't need to take the painkillers, if you can deal with the pain, it'll dissipate after a few days if you rest and eat well and that sort of stuff." And I'm a big fan of listening to advice from people I respect and not putting any more chemicals in my body than I need to. So at that point I made a transition to say, okay, I'm no longer going to take any pharmaceutical. So I haven't taken any pharmaceutical products since then. I don't take aspirins for headaches, any of that sort of stuff. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into the health side of things. I also haven't seen a doctor since end of 2007. I had an ear infection. I just wanted to know whether anything was broken. So I saw this doctor, she's stuck a thing in and had a look around and said, "Oh, it's a bit of an infection." That was going to write a prescription. And I said, "No, I don't do the prescription, the drug thing. I just wanted to know whether anything's broken. If it's just an infection, I'm okay with that. I can self-monitor, self-modulate, self-medicate my way through that." So again, that's been one of my philosophies since early 2000, is become a natural superhuman. These days I'm meditating every day, and I've done that for 10 years. I drink a fresh turmeric juice drink every morning, homemade job. I eat organic foods. I'm recently into more intermittent fasting. I've just recently completed a 5-day water fast. So that health piece has been a big part. But over the last sort of 18 months, I've been interested to understand more of geopolitics. I've been interested to understand the history of money, the nature of money, how money sort of is influenced at an international level. So banks of international settlement, these type of things. The relationships between, say, World Health Organization, World Economic Forums, like United Nations, the origin story of those institutions, and understanding a little bit more, opening myself up to, and I don't even call them conspiracy theories. I'm just someone's got a theory. Let me just listen with discernment. Does that make sense? Does that not make sense? Do they have supporting evidence? Factual supporting evidence to support that? Okay, that makes a little bit of sense. So I've been really opening my mind up over the last 18 months, and it's definitely given me a perspective on, the coronavirus experience. And for me, since March 2020, I haven't bought into any fear around coronavirus, because I've had enough experience to see some of I stopped watching news 20 years ago, and I obviously stopped doing the pharmaceutical thing about 17 years ago. I read a lot on that, so I came into 2020 with a low trust of mainstream media, low trust of the pharmaceutical industry, and a pretty low trust of government as well when it comes to narratives and agendas, and people saying things so that they get voted into power the next year, as opposed to what's beneficial for the long-term health. I've looked at the obesity epidemic and the poor messaging, and through this whole corona thing, there's been no messaging come down at a government level or sort of a health level talking about how to boost the immune system, how to increase your health, how to get healthier so the body is more able to fight off whatever illness, disease, whether it's a coronavirus or whether it's an influenza A or B or anything else. So that for me, caused my spider senses to go up. I never believed in masks because I've been in the military. I studied defense against biological women. Not biological women, that is a total off in the wrong direction. Biological weapons. I'm not even going to edit that out because I think that's pretty funny. So biological weapons. So I knew that these, putting masks on and isolation, I knew that stuff didn't work unless you were completely sealed up, unless you had this, purpose-built rubber sealed mask on, So a lot of inconsistencies there. So I never bought into all of that fear stuff. So I've been able to watch this stuff from afar and I have a pretty interesting perspective on the current state of affairs. And again, going deeper dive, I read an amazing book which is called Dissolving Illusions, which looked at the history of infectious diseases over the last 150 plus years. And it looked at, the rate of infectious disease, came way down before we got into this thing of vaccination. And most of it came down because of changes in lifestyle and changes in sanitation. So getting the sewage off the streets, getting the refuse off the streets, improving people's diets, getting access to clean water, improving working conditions. All of these things have gradually over the last 150 years taken down the level of infectious disease. So again, I'm like, yeah, maybe there's some benefit from the vaccination programs, but not enough for me to sort of can't blind say, it's all good and I'm happy to inject myself with whatever. So that's been my piece there. But again, as I say that, I've got a particular point of view and I'll share that in the health thing. But, overriding all of that is I'm into freedom of choice. And, that was one of the reasons I left the army. I wanted to be my own man. I work for myself. I don't like having bosses because I want the freedom to choose. Okay, I'm not going to work for the next month, or I'm going to go gangbusters for the next month, or whatever the choice is. I love that freedom piece of, freedom of choice. So again, that's been something that's ruffled my feathers, mandates and that sort of stuff. Government impositions, like that stuff is like, I'm not so comfortable with. But again, that's a different conversation. We might get into those conversations if you're doing this, as part of a group program where we're having weekly conversations. If you're self-paced, obviously, there's less dialogue back and forth from me and you and less opportunity to ask me questions. But certainly if you're doing this as part of the group, you can ask me questions and I'll share you my point of view. And again, I'm open to anyone having their own point of view. That for me is a sign of an elevated level of consciousness where there's a level of acceptance of other people's point of views, acceptance of, other people's choices, political choices, sexual choices, lifestyle choices, whatever. It's, if you're an adult, up to you as to what choices you make. So I think that's enough for me. And yes, I could keep talking, but we'll just call it a wrap there. If you've got any other specific questions about me, my life, and my experiences over time, I'm more than happy to share those with you. I work with a lot of clients who going through transitions. One of my favorite things is to work with people over the course of a year or 9 months. So I'm going to talk about that at the end of this becoming a 21st century natural superhuman. I'm going to talk about if you want to have a 9-month immersion with 7 other people, like that would be a beautiful thing. And I love seeing that transition and all of this stuff infused into someone, so you're not just doing courageous things, you're actually a courageous person. That is what I want people to become. And when you're a courageous person, you are most definitely getting the 5 gold star tick of approval of being a superhuman. So I look forward to supporting you in any way, shape, form I can. through this program and beyond the program if that's the course you'd like to take. So have a fantastic day. Thank you for listening to me. I'm just looking at the time there, about 25 minutes. Thank you for listening to me for 25 minutes as I share my story. So have a fantastic time over the program. I'm so glad that you joined me here. All the very best. Have a wonderful day wherever you are on this beautiful, gorgeous, incredible planet of ours, and take care.